This is the video where I'm going over all of the stats from my hike this year, from my total mileage, total elevation gain, total number of steps I took. And then there's also some fun things like how many hours a night did I sleep? How many hitchhikes did I take? How many times did I run into fresh ground? I asked you guys on Instagram stories what kind of stats you want to know about my hike, so I tried to get all of the answers that you're curious about. I'm really excited about this video because one, I was really curious about all of these stats myself, and two, I just thought it would be really entertaining. And if anyone watching this is interested in through hiking the Appalachian Trail, maybe this will give you a better idea of what it's actually like. The first category we're going to talk about is mileage. So pretty basic. In 2023, the official length of the Appalachian Trail was 2,198.4 miles, and I ended up hiking 2,110.7 miles of that. So yes, there was an 87-mile stretch in Maine that I didn't hike, but we're just not going to talk about that in this video. So yes, for trail miles, I hiked 2,110.7 miles, but I tracked every single day with this Coros Apex Pro 2 watch. Every single day of my hike got uploaded to Strava, so I have pretty accurate information when it comes to miles, and spoiler alert, I ended up hiking a lot of extra miles. So when you're hiking the AT, you're not just hiking the miles of the AT, you're taking side trails to shelters, to privies, to water sources, to restaurants, views, hotels. There's a lot of things you can walk to from the Appalachian Trail. So when I added up all the miles that I actually ended up hiking, I hiked an extra 41.2 miles. So part of that is actually the approach trail in Georgia. Part of that was also hiking to Katahdin, because to get to the northern terminus, you have to hike up Katahdin and then come back down the same way you came, or a different trail if you want. And some of those miles probably also came from walking to different Dunkin Donuts on the trail, because that was kind of my thing, and I will get into how many times I went to Dunkin Donuts and got an iced coffee on my through hike later on. My highest mileage day ended up being 28.57 miles, and this was near the Daleville, Virginia area. So I was hiking kind of along the Blue Ridge Parkway. I was slack packing that day, and I also got trail magic multiple times. Cody also hiked part of that trail with me, which made it fun. So I don't want to sit here and tell you that the 28 miles was easy, but I did kind of make it as easy as it possibly could because I really wanted to get those miles done. And that 28 miles took me exactly 12 hours to do, and that's including all the time that I sat at the trail magic. If we're going for the daily average mileage, my average mileage ended up being 18 miles per day, which I think is actually the same from my 2021 through hike. So that seems to be my sweet spot. Now I'll put on the screen how many days it roughly took me to hike through each state of the Appalachian Trail. The quickest state is West Virginia, because I put 1 day, but I'm pretty sure West Virginia is only a couple miles long, so that's super quick. The longest state that it took me to hike through was Virginia, because it's, I don't know, 400 something miles, and I was in Virginia for a month. 31 days. And looking at this, it's kind of fun because I didn't realize how quick the states kind of went after Pennsylvania. So New Jersey, 4 days, New York, 4 days, Connecticut, 3 days, Massachusetts, 4 days. Once you passed Pennsylvania, it kind of did just kind of start going by quick for me. Until I got to New England, then it really felt like it was slowing down. And next we'll go over the elevation gain. I always heard that the total elevation gain for doing an Appalachian Trail through hike was about 500,000 vertical feet of elevation. And when I went through all the stats on Strava, I found that to be pretty accurate because I ended up hiking 490,103 vertical feet of elevation gain, which I think I did a quick Google search is equivalent to hiking up Mount Everest 25 times, which is kind of crazy. My biggest elevation day ended up being 7,182 feet of elevation, and I was surprised because that was only my 5th day of my through hike. I was assuming I was going to do a lot more elevation up in the White Mountains in New England, but that was just not the case. I did average about 4,189 feet of elevation gain per day on my hike. The next category is going to be steps. Now, I always heard that the AT was about 5 million steps, and again, that statistic is pretty true because I ended up hiking 4,444,323 steps from the whole Thru-Hike, and my highest day of steps ended up being 58,000. That was the day I entered Virginia and hiked into Damascus, so I was very motivated to get into town. Going back to my 2021 Thru-Hike, I'm pretty sure my highest step day was 92,000 because that year I did do the 4-state challenge and I hiked a, 45-mile day? Yeah, I didn't do anything that crazy this year. I was much more consistent with my mileage, but I did end up averaging 38,000 steps a day on my Thru-Hike. When I asked you guys on Instagram what stats you wanted to see in this video, so many people were curious about stats relating to weather. So like average temperature and how many days it rained were the big common ones. And I have all that information right here, but we're just gonna take it with a grain of salt. All of this information came from Strava, which is from basically the information that my watch was giving me. So all the temperatures that I have right here are kind of like the feels like temperatures that I was experiencing that day. And it also gave me weather conditions. So for instance, it told me if it was clear, cloudy, partly cloudy, or rainy. But keep in mind, it just kind of takes the average from the whole day. So I had my watch going for about 12 hours. So whatever it mostly was that day is what it tells me. And I just wanted to make that disclaimer because, for instance, on day 86, it's telling me it was clear. But that day it was actually cloudy, it hailed at one point, and then I experienced like some of the worst rain that I've seen on the trail ever. So it might have been clear at some point in the day, but I consider that day rainy even though Strava didn't. So with that disclaimer out of the way, it was clear for 49 days. It was cloudy for 36 days, partly cloudy for 16 days, rainy for 14 days, and then one day it was foggy, one day it was windy. It's telling me it rained for 14 days, but it's probably 14 days that it rained all day. It probably most definitely rained more than that. The temperature I feel a little more confident about with this answer. So I have the average temperature per month and the average temperature per state. So for reference, I started my hike March 9th in Georgia and got to Maine like the end of June. So each month it did keep getting warmer. So the average temperature in March was 36 degrees, April 46, May 52, June 56. And I did end up hiking for 2 weeks in Maine in September, and that average temperature was 57. This was actually a lot colder than I thought it was. Again, this is the feels like temperature, so this is the temperature I was experiencing up in the mountains. Wind, I don't know what goes into feels like temperature, but that is definitely a little chilly. The highest temperature I experienced was 74 degrees and the lowest temperature I experienced was 17. Now I'll also put up the average temperature that I experienced per state because someone requested that. The coldest state was Georgia at 33.5 degrees. The warmest state was Maryland, which was 62 degrees. I think that skewed a little bit because I was only in Maryland for like 2 days, so it was just a warm 2 days. Someone also asked for the amount of days that it was below freezing, and that is 12. Now, a lot of people were wondering how many calories I consumed per day, and I would actually love to know that myself, but I didn't keep track of the calories I was eating per day, and I didn't think there was a way for me to go back in my Thru-Hike and watch my vlogs and really figure it out. But I do know how many calories I burned per day because of my watch, so this kept track of everything. I burned an average of 2,504 calories per day, and that's just from the hike. That's not the calories I was burning just by living. I don't really know the science behind that, but that's the answer. The most amount of calories I burned in one day was 3,848 calories in one day. A stat that I am just super excited about and proud of is that I worked with Element 26 times in 2023, which I'm just really grateful for because their support on my channel has been a huge part in allowing me to make all of these videos. So thank you to Element for continuing to sponsor my videos and this one. I wish I had the stat for how much Element I actually drank on my Thru-Hike because I'm sure it was a lot. But right here I have the 3 flavors that I know for sure I drank the most, and that's orange salt, watermelon salt, and raspberry salt. So if you don't know, Element is an electrolyte drink mix. I would take one of these packets, pour it in my water, shake it up, and then it's just the perfect electrolyte drink mix that I can drink on the go on my Thru-Hike. So you can imagine with me burning 2,500 calories a day on average, I am sweating a lot. So I would drink one of these Elements most days so I can replenish all of those electrolytes I was losing through my sweat, because you lose so much sodium in your sweat, and one of these has 1,000 milligrams of sodium to help replenish that, because sometimes just water isn't enough. And I always felt super good and super hydrated when I had one of these. The flavors were really good. Like I said, these were my 3 favorite flavors. The raspberry and the watermelon just felt so refreshing on a nice warm day. And then if it was the morning, I kind of opted for the orange salt because it just felt like a morning orange juice type drink. So Element just has been the perfect sponsor for my channel because it is generally something I love and use all the time and really helped me on my Thru-Hike. If you want to try Element for yourself or reorder some if you're out, my link as always is drinkelement.com/Nahamsha. You'll get a sample pack with 8 flavors. All 3 of these are going to be in that sample pack. You'll get that sample pack with any order you place on their website. Again, that's drinkelement.com/Nahamsha. So I figured out the stats for where I slept each night on trail, and I was actually surprised to find out that I slept in my tent more than I slept in an actual bed, because I believe in 2021 it was exactly 50-50 tent versus bed. But I slept in my tent 59 times and I slept in a bed 58 times. So 24 of those were a hostel, 25 of those nights was a hotel, 4 of those nights was a trail angel's house, 3 of those nights were my own house, and 2 were the AMC huts up in the White Mountains. So that's where I slept each night. I ended up seeing 3 bears, 2 moose, and 0 rattlesnakes. Definitely saw at least 1 rattlesnake in 2021. Oh my god, I see the rattle! And I'm surprised I didn't run into one this year, actually. I hitchhiked 0 times, but there was 1 time in 2021 that I tried to hitchhike and 1 time this year that I tried to hitchhike. But for some reason, when I'm standing on the side of the road, it's like so hard for me to actually put my thumb up because I just feel so awkward. I would ask around for rides, I'd text shuttles, I would always figure out a way, but I never actually just got in a car that I hailed from the side of the road. I ended up running into fresh ground 8 times, which was amazing. Most of them were, I think, in Virginia, kind of around McAfee Knob when Cody was visiting, because I know fresh ground wanted to see Cody again. Then I ran into him again in Maryland when I was hiking with Bad Bat. So my average heart rate, I didn't go in and look at my heart rate every single day on Strava, even though I know the information is there. But I just took a random 10 days out of my Thru-Hike, figured out my average heart rate for those 10 days, averaged it together, and it was about 109. So again, this watch was running, tracking my heart rate and everything from the moment I started hiking to the moment I finished, but it was also running for all my breaks and just times I was sitting on the side of the trail. So it recorded everything. Average was 109. How many 0 days did I take? So that's kind of hard to figure out. I took 1 0 day in Roan Mountain, Tennessee, when there was kind of, I think it was like a tornado warning or some crazy wind advisory. I took 3 zeros in Virginia, but that's when I did a road trip to Delaware to run the Delaware Marathon with my friend. So that didn't really feel like a 0 day because I still ran 26 miles for one of those. And then I took 2 0 days in New Hampshire when I was feeling kind of homesick and I was near my house. I guess 6. But then I also took 77 0 days from when I got off trail in June to when I got back on trail in September to try to finish. And then when I did get back on the trail in September, I took 1 0 day because of a hurricane. So that's kind of the gist of how many days I took off trail. The state that I hiked the fastest and the state that I hiked the slowest. Now, I didn't like get into the numbers for this, but I kind of have an idea of what the answer is. I went the fastest in Virginia because the trail, yeah, there are some tough sections, but there's also a lot of sections where it's just like gradual rolling hills, especially the Shenandoah area. And I think I was able to hike pretty fast in that area. The slowest state was definitely Maine. One, because it rained every day and the rocks were just super slippery. There's also the Mahoosic Notch where I'm climbing up and over all these boulders, and it's just really hard to hike in Maine. So that's that answer. Someone wants to know how many rivers I crossed. I feel like that is really hard to figure out because you're crossing rivers basically every day. It could be as little as just a stream, like little water source that you're stepping over, or it could be just a giant river that you can't even cross, like Bemis Stream. Yeah, I don't really have a number, but I did figure out my biggest 3 water crossings from the trail. Number 1, obviously Bemis Stream. That's where I ended my hike in June. And then the second 2 biggest ones were actually both in the 100-mile wilderness in Maine and both on the same day. But I was with Cody for both of them too, so at least I wasn't crossing those rivers by myself. And we could really take our time and help each other out. I have trauma from river crossings. How many shoes did I go through? I actually can't recall. I feel like I used to know this number, but I just forgot. I hiked the whole time in Saucony Peregrines, which are definitely a lot more durable than Ultras, I believe. So I was getting maybe 600, sometimes 700 miles from one pair of shoes. I did switch to Ultras for a brief moment, just for like Connecticut and Massachusetts, because that's all they had in the shop when I needed a replacement. And then the day I ended my hike in June, my shoes were completely torn apart. So if I had to guess, probably 5. We'll go with that number. My mom asked on Instagram how many times did she visit me on trail, and I counted. I got to about 9 visits from my mom on trail, which was really fun. I think her longest visit was probably Pennsylvania. She stayed for almost a week and helped me through basically the whole state. She also visited for a while down in Virginia when Cody was there, so like kind of the McAfee Knob, Triple Crown area, so she got to meet fresh ground. Her sister came with her, so she stayed probably like 4 or 5 days then. She also visited me a couple times in New Hampshire when she's just like a couple-hour drive. She visited me at the top of Mount Washington. She took the Cog Railway up. She visited me in North Conway, New Hampshire, so I could get my eye checked out because I had a really bad infection. And then she was there in Maine when I got off the trail, in Maine when I got back on the trail. So I believe it was 9 times. This was a very interesting question that someone wanted to know, but like how many hours per night was I sleeping on the Appalachian Trail? And my watch does also track my sleep, so I went into the app to try to figure it out. I was shocked when I pulled this up and found out that my first night on trail in my tent, I slept 3 hours and 53 minutes. That is not a lot. I don't remember being that deprived of sleep. I was actually awake that night from 2:45 a.m. to 3:25 a.m. And then the next night, I only slept 2 hours and 24 minutes, which I believe I was in a hostel for that, so I don't really know why. I fell asleep at almost 1 a.m. and was awake from basically 1:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. Again, have no idea why. I don't remember not getting sleep. Now, I didn't have my watch on every single night when I was sleeping. Some nights it was charging, some nights it just wasn't comfortable and I took it off. But the first recorded night where I got over 8 hours of sleep was day 7 at Chica and Sunset's hostel. And I was very surprised on day 13, I ended up sleeping 9 hours and 54 minutes. And I was surprised because I was actually in a Smoky Mountain shelter. The shelter was probably full with a lot of dirty, stinky hikers, but I think I got a lot more sleep in the shelter because everyone just goes to bed so early and I just didn't distract myself like playing on my phone at night. So when everyone was in bed at 8 o'clock, I was too. I ended up falling asleep at 9, and I didn't wake up until after 7 the next morning, and I barely woke up at all. Now, if we're just looking at monthly averages, March, I averaged about 7 hours of sleep. April, 7 hours. May, just under 7. I think I got decent sleep on my Thru-Hike. All right, now I'll go back on Instagram and go over everything else that you guys asked. A lot of things I unfortunately just couldn't figure out. It would take way too long to figure out these stats, like how many times did I resupply? How many times did I fall? How many lasagna Mountain House meals did I eat? How many gushers did I eat? These are all things that you guys asked. Snake encounters, I didn't keep track of. Cat holes, I didn't keep track of. Ticks, I think probably between like 3 to 6 ticks I've found. Mouse encounters, I've only seen 1 mouse around my tent, and that was in Shenandoah National Park. The average amount that I spent per resupply, I do not know, because I didn't really track any of my money spending this year, but I do have a lot of information about how much money I spent on my Thru-Hike in 2021, so I'll link that video below if you want to check that out. How much trail magic in general did I see? I don't know that answer, but I feel like I got a decent amount of trail magic. How many injuries did I get? I don't really think I got injured. Oh, this was the big one that I wanted to answer. Hold on, I have this. How many times did I get a Dunkin Donuts iced coffee on the Appalachian Trail? It took me watching every single vlog to get this answer because I really wanted to know and I wanted to answer this in this video. I went to Dunkin Donuts 14 times and got an iced coffee at every single one. I went in Franklin, Harrisburg. On my way to McAfee Knob, I got one the day before I ran my marathon. I got one the day of my marathon. Cumberland Valley, Lehigh Gap, Delaware Water Gap, Manchester, Vermont. Another Dunks in Manchester. New Hampshire on my 0 day. Gorham, New Hampshire, Bethel, Maine, and on my way to Katahdin. I also had an iced coffee from Starbucks once, McDonald's 3 times, Cumberland Farms once, and I actually had 1 fake Dunkin Donuts iced coffee. There's hotel coffee in my Dunkin Donuts cup. So I think that comes out to having dunks almost once a week on my Thru-Hike. Number of people who recognize me from YouTube, I have no idea, but I think it happened a lot more than I thought it would. I actually think I'm just gonna end this video here. I think it's had a lot of information so far, a lot of stats. I feel like I've just been sitting here forever just reading through this huge Excel sheet that I've been making for a while. Let me know if you're hiking the AT in 2024. I wish you the best of luck. Let me know if you have any questions, and Happy New Year. I hope everyone has a great 2024, and I'll see you then. Bye.